there, this is Brittany from Just Be Crafty. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make a crocheted wreath cover. This tutorial is part of my Crochet Spring Floral Wreath pattern project. I have videos for the flowers, leaves, and foliage spirals that attach to this to form the wreath. I'll be sure to have those videos linked in the description box below so that way you can go and check them out. For the wreath form, I am using a 13.8 inch Floral Craft Design It foam form. I believe I purchased mine at Dollar Tree, or it could have been Walmart. Either way, it was probably around $1, definitely under $5. The thickness of the wreath is about 5.75 inches. For the complete list of materials in the written pattern for this particular piece, as well as the rest of the project, please see the link to my blog post in the description box below. You'll want to check that out and follow along with that post as you follow along in all of the videos. Before we get started, I want to take the time to invite you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and to hit the bell so that you're notified whenever I post a new tutorial. I post new patterns on Tuesdays and new stitch techniques on Fridays, so you definitely don't want to miss out. So now, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Grab your crochet hook and yarn, and I will have the exact materials I'm using linked in the description box below. We're going to start with a slip knot, and we're going to chain 24. Or if you're using a different size wreath form, you want to make sure that you have enough chains to snugly fit around the width of the wreath that you want to cover. Okay, so now we have our 24 chains, or however many chains that you have for your wreath cover, and working into the back bars of our foundation chain. You're just going to flip your foundation chain over to expose those little bars. Working into the third chain from our hook, we're going to half double crochet. So find that third little bar from our hook and place your half double crochet right there. And now you're just going to repeat this process to the end of the row. We're going to half double crochet in each little back bar of each chain until we get to the end of the row. Okay, so I'm almost to the end of row 1. I just have 2 half double crochets left. And now my last half double crochet. And now we've just completed row 1. So we can turn our work and begin row 2. So we'll start row 2 by chaining 2. And now we're going to be working half double crochets in each stitch across the row, and you're going to be only working into the back bar. So half double crochet in there, half double crochet into the back bar of each stitch to the end of the row. So if you'd like, go ahead and pause here and meet back up with me once you complete the row. Now we're almost to the end of row 2, and I just have a couple more half double crochet stitches left. And now this is my last stitch. And that is what your first 2 rows should look like. So now we're ready to turn our work, and we're just going to keep repeating row 2 from here on out. So we're going to start with 2 chains, and we're going to half double crochet in the back bars of each stitch to the end of the row. Keep repeating row 2 until your piece measures to about 37 inches, or in my case this was 77 rows, or long enough to snugly fit around the circumference of your wreath. You don't want your cover to be too loose. So now I'm just finishing off my last couple stitches of my wreath cover. So now you're ready to cut your yarn and secure, making sure that you leave yourself a really long tail. That long tail is what you're going to use to stitch your wreath cover onto your wreath form. Okay, so I have my extremely long tail, and I'm just going to pull that tail through the loop on my hook. And I'll pull that tight to secure. And now we're ready for the fun part. We can add our wreath cover onto our wreath form. So grab your wreath form, some closed stitch markers, and your wreath cover. So rather than me verbally explaining this entire next part, I think it might just be easier for you to watch what I did. I'm going to be using my closable stitch markers to hold the wreath cover in place so that way it'll be easier for when it's time to sew it together. You want to make sure that as you wrap your wreath cover around your wreath form that you're lining up your stitches as best as possible. This will ensure that your wreath cover looks nice and even and as beautiful as it possibly can. So go ahead, enjoy this next part, and feel free to rewind and pause as needed, and I will meet back up with you once we are ready to then stitch together our wreath cover on our wreath form. So now I've reached the end of my wreath cover, and now I'm just going to use a stitch marker to pull the two ends together and just hold those tight. And it's okay if you want your wreath form to be snug here because you don't want it to be too loose. You can just use two to pull the two ends together, two stitch markers to hold the two ends together. So now we have our wreath cover pinned in place, and now we're ready to stitch it closed. So grab your yarn needle and thread your extremely long yarn tail. I will admit this was a little bit frustrating, and honestly I used too long of a tail. You do not need to use a tail this long, and you can use shorter tails as you go. You don't have to use extremely long tail as I did. It probably took longer than what it needed to. And we're just going to work around the wreath form, stitching the wreath cover closed. I didn't do anything fancy here. I just made sure that my stitches were lined up the best that I could line them up, and I just went into each row of the cover and just seamed them closed, going up and down through the stitches. And now I'm just going to speed up this process so you can kind of see what it looks like as I stitch this closed all the way around the wreath form. Now I'm just working on stitching the last couple stitches together for my wreath cover seam, and next is closing up our wreath cover loop. And we'll be joining our starting and ending cover edges together to close the loop and to complete our wreath form cover. So now I'm just lining up my stitches vertically, and I'm going to whip stitch the two ends closed. Nothing fancy here, just simple whip stitch, just threading in and out through both layers and going all the way around your little wreath form. So now I'm almost done stitching my wreath cover closed. So we can cut our tail if your tail is too long, and then I like to just tie my two tails together. And now you can take your yarn needle and just take your two tails and thread them both into your yarn needle and just tuck them inside of your wreath cover just to hide them. And there you have your completed wreath cover. And then this is just a glimpse of what your seam looks like. So flip it over and that's the front. I really hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please let me know by giving the video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already and would like to, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you never miss a new tutorial. I come out with new patterns on Tuesdays and new stitch techniques on Fridays, so you definitely don't want to miss out. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!